welcome back everybody to another Lady Leaders webinar. I'm always excited to get to do these, and I've been loving so much the feedback that people have sent me and told me like how much they've been helpful. And so it really is nice to get to hear what is helpful, what people would like to hear more of. But it's been fun, and I was excited to do this one, and I was really excited to get to hear my good friend Addison Killeen is going to be joining us today. And as always, Ashlee, it's just fun to get to see you. Sometimes this is where we get to connect. So,
Totally.
so welcome to both of you. Thanks for doing this. Today, we're going to be talking about the keys to the most successful dental practices. And, I think that all of us can attest that when we start looking at whether it be in DSI or, people that we coach or talk to, there does start to become similarities amongst the most successful practices, things that they do that maybe are different, but it's different and consistent. They tend to have similar value sets, is kind of what I say. They don't all do things the same way, but they tend to have similar value sets. And that allows them to, over time, create results quicker. So I wanted to just kind of get into, I know I kind of set out, here's some things that I noticed. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the things I see when I'm working with practices that make them some of the most successful. So I'm going to just kind of dive right in, if that's okay with you guys. Um, the first one, and it's funny, I just got off the phone with somebody, and the first thing that I think really sets the most successful practices apart is clarity. Clarity of who they are, clarity of why they exist, clarity of how do we do things around here, clarity of what matters most. And they consistently reevaluate that clarity on those points every single month, quarter. And usually, and I know Addison does this for sure. I think you do this too, Ashlee. I know DSN does this, but they actually have kind of strategy sessions at the end of the year to reevaluate everything clarity wise to make sure that is that what we want to continue to repeat. And I think that for me is always, I did a lot of calls this week, and I think almost all of them I touched on this point. Like, are we clear who we are, why we exist, how we do things, and what matters most? So, Addison, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I remember many years ago, my first dental coach, you bring someone into your practice and you're like, okay, I'm going to cancel out a full day of patients. And they sit down and they're like, well, what's your vision? And I remember being so pissed off. Like, honestly, I was just like, no, I am not here for this. Like, I brought you in to tell me strategies and tactics and the hard facts and how to get more production out of the chairs. And they were like, well, let's talk about your vision. Let's talk about your mission. Let's set out your core values. And at the time, I was unaware of how important that is. Now, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's actually extremely important because you and I both know, and Ashlee has been a witness to so many folks who are chasing the wrong vision. They're like, well, I want to become, like this person who has this kind of setup, or, whether it's like a mega practice or a multiple practice or an implant only type setup, whatever your kind of niche is, somebody can get lost chasing somebody else's dream. And so I think the clarity of like, what are you good at? Why are we here? And the focus, like really it's about focusing on, okay, we're going to really do something well about around like this niche, whether that's I want to be my neighborhood family friendly dentist. And I want to work these specific hours and I want to just keep my clinical skill set into this niche. And that does not limit you from a financial or success perspective. You can do extremely well with tons of kind of practices. And it is still mind-boggling when I hear somebody tell me a kind of practice and because I'm not familiar with it, I stupidly think to myself, well, that can't be very successful. And then I see their numbers and I'm like, my jaw hits the floor and I'm like, are you serious? Like, this is how you can run? And they're like, yeah, we figured out this and this and this. And so the clarity around, yeah, what your strategy is to get to your own goal. And some people's goals are different. And like much higher, much lower, or their goals are around a different set of wealth, which it might be time, time freedom. We have our friend Dr. Justin Schmidt. His wealth is time wealth. So he practices 3 days a week and then takes off like 6 days from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And so, whatever your vision of success is, I think the clarity is super. I mean, I'm glad you started with that because at the first time that I thought about it, I was also like, oh, this poo-pooed that idea. But now I understand that is extremely important. Ashley, you've seen that from a third party perspective. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, and firsthand too, right? So I was there was Mark was building his practices and it's the same type of thing. And if you're not clear in the beginning on what your foundation is as far as your mission and your core values and what you hold dear, and getting your team on board with that, it's everything is shaky at best, from there on out. So it's, it seems like fluffy stuff and but it's just not. It's the foundation of everything. And so I agreed. I love that you started with that, Summer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think what's funny is you brought up such a great, both of you, as you were thinking, I'm like writing stuff down. I'm like, oh, yes, like such good points because, it's funny when you don't have the clarity to start with, you'll tolerate everything because you
Mm.
don't know what your standards are. And my feeling is I joke like the more I do this, the more focused I become, the more people I think I repel. Which I did, I used to be
That's
like,
okay though.
exactly. And I used to do everything from a place of making other people okay. And when instead I was okay with exactly what I wanted, who I was, the practice I wanted to build, what I wanted to create. I joke when I kept my eyes on my own paper, incredible things happened. And I knew the standards to which I was going to hold things. And the people who were supposed to be on that mission with me were going to come along because they knew the lighthouse that they were following. They knew where they were going. Instead, I think when you don't, when you have the fuzzy everything, you truly will attract exactly that type of person, because you don't have clear standards, so they don't have clear standards. Um, and I
Well,
think, go
and
ahead,
I,
please.
I'll go ahead with, with that is when you try to be that practice that maybe tries to handle everything, try it from a clinical standpoint or from a business model standpoint, you can get too frayed. You're going in too many directions. Whereas, like you said, if you're focused on this is what my practice is, this is what I'm good at, this is my strategy, and not just for a couple weeks, not just, well, I'm going to try CEREC this week or, in office crowns and then, oh, next week there's another shiny object syndrome. As long as you focus on your own practice and what you're good at, long-term stability and perseverance is what gets you to success. And that success, it's building the wide base of the pyramid at first, which seems like, oh, I'm not getting very far. And it gets you to the pinnacle of your goals, your
Yeah.
personal goals of what you're going for.
Absolutely. Well, and sometimes, like you said, people aren't recognizing that they're increasing the ceiling of complexity with every decision they're making. And it's a ceiling of complexity that isn't even going to give them the result they want because they didn't know what result they wanted in the first place. And I read on vacation last week, I read this book called, I think it's something along like 10X is better than 2X by Dan Sullivan. And it's really this entire concept of people keep just trying to do like a little bit of everything, a little bit of trying to keep all the balls in the air versus like hyper focusing on kind of like the book, The One Thing. And his whole point is like, you're going to get drastically better results because your standards and what you want are so dang clear. And it was just a good reminder for me too of clarity is really kind of the foundation of all of it. It seems kind of woo woo, but it is that foundation. Well,
Last
unless
thing
we
on
have one,
that though, too, I have to say, like you're like, oh, I'm on vacation, so I'm going to read a business book. You know what I mean? I think that's a key there, maybe, of some very successful practices. I know Dr. Addison Killeen here, who is either writing a book or reading a book constantly.
yeah.
I
So,
remember hotels by which book I was writing at that hotel.
Yeah.
But like I'll say some of the most successful practices, when they're focused on that one thing, they also understand the kind of leader they need to become. And like, what kind of decisions does this kind of practice owner do? Or what kind of actions has led this practice owner to success? So I would say maybe the second big key is like the person in that leadership seat. Would you agree, Summer?
What's funny is, what a beautiful segue. Thank you for that. The number two that I had was led by leaders that are self-aware, striving for that goal, and striving to consistently be effective, not right. And I think that's exactly where I was going next, is the self-aware leaders. If they've got the clarity, they know where they're going, they say to themselves, who do I need to become to support that vision? Because a lot of times we're going to have to become a little bit different version of ourselves to support exactly what we want. And, you know, it's, man, Addison, this was not even planned. And I'm like, that was so good. Because those leaders, I put, the thing for me that I notice is they are the ones in the practices that will look in the mirror first. And Ashlee has heard me say it over and over, but like, they're the ones who will invest in themselves a ton. They will do the coaching, they'll do the mentorship, they'll spend the time on the weekends. And when things aren't going well, they're the first ones to say, man, something fell apart with either clarity or some, like, I'm going to take accountability for this. I'm going to look at myself first and realize something slipped through the cracks, and I'm going to start with me first. Like I said, they look to be effective, not right. So
Mm.
go ahead. What else kind of shows up for you with that?
Um, yeah, I would say they understand the number of decisions that comes with each kind of practice and the size and magnitude of those decisions. Um, they understand decisions that are reversible versus non-reversible or irreversible. That's not a real word. Yeah, you don't have to be right. That's what I heard from you, Summer.
Yeah.
So like irreversible decisions of, I mean, sometimes people have a vision of like a fee for service practice, and they say, well, like if I once I go down this road, there's no turning back. That's a no, there is turning back. You just go back in network. If it's too damaging to your practice and it only becomes apparent after the fact, okay, that's a reversible decision. There's haircuts and there's tattoos. And so I think a good leader understands the difference between those types of things. Um, you said clarity. I mean, just the clarity to keep focusing on um, what's the most important issue at the time, but also like longitudinally over the long run.
Yeah.
I think as much as going back to the soft skills, like clarity around the core values, always hiring and firing by the core values. It's actually kind of tough. Like it can get boring to be like, oh, these are still our core values. Nothing's new, nothing's changed.
Mhm.
But then clarity to know if something is going wrong in a certain department, maybe let's say hygiene is not up to 3.3 times their pay. Maybe they're still at 2.7, but maybe that's not the most important thing you should be focusing on. Like you can't keep your eye on 10 balls. You need to be focusing on the one or two most important issues in the practice that is your goal. And maybe that's growth, 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 or maybe that's you're going for your second or third practice and you're really wanting to get your system down for how do you do good site selection? How do you do economical build outs? Maybe you're systemizing that part of your business operation. So clarity around what is the most important problem du jour, not just playing like the game of putting out fires all the time.
Yeah. Well, one thing I said is, the webinar Ash and I did last month, I think like great leaders, they go through exactly that process before they jump to making decisions. Because a lot of times I see people make kind of scarcity fear-based decisions that end up more like that henna tattoo where it's going to last a while. It may not be permanent, but it's going to stick around for a bit. And they did it out of scarcity rather than looking in the mirror. And like I really did love that webinar, not to toot my own horn, but I'm like, I love that webinar that Ash and I did because we really did walk through, great leaders can walk through the 5 C's of clarity, commitment, consistency, consequence, and when to cut the cord based on that vision. And they walk through those steps for their team, for their departments, and they know when to do what. And like I said, they don't make more of a long-term decision based on a short-term feeling.
Mhm.
And I think that I see people their emotions can get the best of them as a leader versus just taking that moment, stopping, stepping back, looking in the mirror, reevaluating clarity, and kind of thinking to themselves, wait a minute, where am I coming from? Am I coming from scarcity and fear? Or am I coming from, hey, wait, hold on, take a breath, let's refocus type thing, a decision there.
Well, and I think that's an appropriate thing, that a good leader, which is key, so key to a successful practice, a good leader knows the data, and they know the story that the data tells. They're really into a few key metrics. Now it's a, Jocko Willink, in his book, well, a couple of his books. I mean, there's the economy of leadership. Like, you want to be into the data, but you can't be so deep in the data that you're trying to count grains of rice. So it's finding the happy place. But part of that is like knowing your P&L pretty well, knowing some of the key data points in your practice. And just one example is, I was talking to another dentist in the network, and they were telling me about an expense that they were going to have to pay, about $795 per doctor. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's quite a lot. And they said, well, yeah, it is quite a lot per doctor. I mean, that's like $5,000 a month for my practice. But they said, no, but the return on your investment of that $5,000 is probably $10,000 or $15,000 per month. And so they knew the data, they knew the gut feeling is, I would never pay that amount of money per crown or per whatever doctor. But then the return on your investment, like any, investment in technology and investment in people, the return on your investment, a good leader knows the data well enough. They know trends over time to know, oh, this is like, it seems a gut reaction would be, that's not a good cost, or that's not a good investment. But they know the data well enough to be like, no, this is a good investment, and I'm going to double down, and I'm going to use this technology per se, or I'm going to use this person, or maybe it's, you want to develop a training curriculum, and you say, well, $10,000 or whatever for a training curriculum. Well, no, that's actually going to pay off huge dividends by making better trained assistants or better trained front desk staff, so that you can hire cheaper labor, train them up internally, having a better selection of candidates. I mean, there's so many other things, and a good leader will understand all the soft numbers, the subjective numbers, and the objective data, and they can mesh that idea in their head.
Right. They know what's an investment and what's an expense. They
Mhm.
understand that. And they see things, people being obviously the biggest investment. And they see it as such, an investment, not an expense. Well, and it's funny, I'm like, boy, Addison, nailing it. Because my point number 3 was these leaders they run practices that know the numbers that matter. So I'm like, yep. But before I go on to that one, I'm like, Ashlee, once again, you sometimes have a nice perspective of the self-aware leaders that you see in some of the most successful practices being, not needing to be right, but being effective, being the ones who are the first ones to admit, like, this didn't work, no problem, pivot, this is how we're going to move forward type leaders. What do you see, or what would you love to add, Ashlee?
Well, I first of all wrote down, like, I think so that's got to be one of your books, right? Like, Effective, Not Right. Like, maybe that's your summer. That's an amazing title. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that is good.
I love that. Yeah, to add to that, and it goes right into what you both are talking about. I think one of the biggest things in that category of effective, not right, is the leader who engages their team to solve the problem and doesn't just feel like they have to solve the problem completely on their own. Because if they do, if they're trying to work out a system for the back office department, like, let's understand where they're coming from. Let's understand why they're currently doing it this way and why it's not working, and work together to get backwards. It's not the owner who's showing up and just saying, hey, this is how it's going to be because I watched a webinar with Addison and Summer and they said that's how it should be. It's
Yeah.
hey, let's look at what's going on in our office. Let's look at why we're currently doing things the way we're doing it, and seeing, what do you guys think? How could this be better for you? What do you think? Oh, okay, well, maybe we don't agree there, but let's work around it, and come to a cohesive agreement about the systems, about maybe why the team was doing things on one end. I know oftentimes even in DSN, Addison's like, hey, let's get rid of this thing. And we're like, no, we really need that thing. Let me tell you why.
Yeah.
Because
It's so
Addison goes by the numbers, and we're like,
Yep,
yes, sir,
yep.
I understand, but also
That's yeah,
that, is a very solid piece of software that we need.
Mhm.
So
yeah,
anyway,
Yeah,
but again, he's effective. He's, not right. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, if
yeah,
that's the reason, I get it. Let's do it.
yep, yeah, yeah. And I do think like the great leaders, it's funny, like they spend so much time and Addison, I think you'll attest, like I've decided 80% of success is actually the leader and their mindset. 20% is the
hmm
systems and strategy, if I'm in my humble opinion.
yeah,
And to me, the best self-aware leaders are the ones that spend just as much time in learning how to communicate with their team, learning how to be an incredibly world-class, effective communicator that once again doesn't start with ego or their stories. It starts more with truly how do we be effective? And
hmm
that's something, Ashlee, I know I've said a million times in all my different webinars, but when I look at those leaders, and I know when I've been the most effective, like it's when, like I said, I'm able to actually, I joke, fully apologize, not do the half apology. Because I always think that to me, the half apology is a slightly like a backhanded compliment. Um, and to me, the best self-aware leaders are the ones that can stand in front of that room, whether it be in front of 4, 7, or for me, sometimes it's been in front of 35, and say, you know what, guys, I dropped the ball and I apologize. I take full responsibility for this, and I am sorry how this went down. This is what I'm going to do next. You can count on me moving forward because this is what I'm going to do. Is there any questions? Not not modeling for them the exact thing I wouldn't want, which is, hey guys, you know what? Yeah, I mean, that didn't work, but I mean, like it happened because so and so kind of didn't do this. And then the moon didn't go align quite right with Jupiter. And then, Trump, president again. So, like, I just think sometimes those half done apologies really to me just speaks volumes. So I love the leaders who can stand up and just be like, because that's exactly the behavior I'd want back. And I love it when I've got a team, and I joke my favorite thing with especially my leadership team, is I look at them and they'll go, I know, doctor, I know, like I should have done this. This probably happened and blah, blah. Next time I'm going to do this. And I go, okay. And I walk away. And like, it's funny, that book I just got done reading, our goal should be to create self-managing teams. I think accountability, that word, it can get really stretched to a point where we're micromanaging. And I think ideally, if we're looking to create some of that freedom, the best leaders, they engage in tons of communication training. They care just as much about that as they do doing a great crown prep. They are the first ones to fully apologize, and they do it well, and they do it often. They model exactly what they want back. Um, and like I said, they are the ones who will go first with that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
just to kind of close that loop, but
Well, I'll say that what I heard a little bit in what you were saying, the two things, and I had to remind myself what it was. It was a P and an L, not a profit and loss, but a good leader is positive. So even though if you take ownership, you're still positive in the fact that, okay, sorry, I'm going to take ownership. I dropped the ball on this project, but I'm going to pick it up. And this project is still going to be successful for the practice. We're going to execute it. It's going to be great. I think a solid, successful practice always has a positive leader at the helm. So positivity is huge. And even if that's not your natural MO, you fake it. I mean, you drink enough coffee or ashwagandha or whatever, and you do it. The L though is learning. A good leader, like why we do clinical CE, it's because we're always learning. You want to be the best at this. You want to be improving your clinical skills. Well, a good leader is always learning how to be a better leader. And that's, why you're on vacation reading a business book about communication and goals. It's just a natural habit. So a successful practice, I think, when I look at the leader of that, it's a leader who is just studying consistently. They're reading books, listening to podcasts, just looking up materials so that they can be better. So the P and L, positive and learning. But
yes,
that was two of my things that I thought of.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the new book coming out, the new P&L you need as a leader.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So many books coming out of them. Well, perfect. So far we've got clarity, we've got self-aware leaders that care so much about, well, one, they care about being effective for sure more than they care about their own egos. Um, the third, Addison, you dove into that one beautifully. These are the practices that know the numbers. And, in my opinion, they do. They see things as investments instead of expenses all the time. They see numbers as more. One thing that I've noticed is they become wise when it comes to looking at the numbers, that they see it more like a fuel tank, not good or bad, just information.
Mhm.
The best leaders and the most successful practices, when they see overhead raise, all they really care about is what's going on, why is it happening, and is it because of an investment? Versus seeing the numbers as good, bad. It's just information.
Mhm.
Um, and as they gain more and more knowledge and wisdom with this, they apply it. You create the most beautiful weekly scorecards and things like that. I think we've borrowed some of yours, Addison, that I know Debbie loves to use. But they can just take that knowledge and week by week kind of tweak it. But they realize it's just information. Instead of getting
Mhm.
set in the identity of this is good or bad, it's just numbers. And they aren't scared of the numbers. It just gives them this neutral sense of clarity. They don't get stuck, and you alluded to this, of like majoring in the minors. And sometimes I see
Mhm.
that they just major in the minors when the house is burning down over here. I'll joke like they'll spend more time cutting a 0.25% overhead on something versus seeing the opportunity of communicating and training over here that would actually grow things exponentially. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's when it comes to the numbers, I couldn't agree with you more. Like they don't shy away, but they use them in a realistic way, realizing there's people always underneath the numbers as well.
Mhm. Well, for example, I'll say one of the things I saw in our weekly numbers was that our days in AR jumped over the last month and a half, like 6 weeks. I saw it jump from like 25 up to 30, and it was a data point. Which, okay, 5 days of collections. It's actually a lot of money, but basically, it's just like we're playing a game. And I think I could go back to Simon Sinek's book of the infinite game. Like the game is going to go on and on and on. The spreadsheet can get unlimited rows, but you just want to keep playing the name and like, okay, why is that number going up? So I went to my collections department and I said, hey, what's going on here? And they said, oh yeah, we didn't tell you, but we upgraded the software a week or two ago. It broke the
Mm,
attachment sending thing. So a bunch of claims we thought were sent, but we didn't get any feedback that they didn't get received. So now we're resending the claims and we'll get all that money. And it's not a big deal. I just said, oh, okay, cool. Thanks for the heads up. I saw this in the numbers, so that explains the divot, or the dip that we're seeing. And that's all, I think as a leader, you just need to be slightly more agnostic about many of the numbers, but you use those numbers as a tool to play the game better. This is just your scorecard, this is your scoreboard. You want to keep winning the game or on a positive trajectory. Um, but also trying to achieve numbers. I think some people, they use these numbers, these scorecards, as goals, and they value their worth against them. Saying,
mhm.
well, if I don't hit this percentage of case acceptance, then my practice is junk. Or if I don't hit this, you know, production number, then I don't have a good practice. And every practice is so different. Different areas of the country, you have different rents, different wages. Every practice is so different in how we mark down treatment and whether it's accepted or
Yeah.
scheduled or whatever. So you can't really play the game against somebody else. It's playing the game against your own numbers. And so I think that's why it's just you need to look at these numbers and play your own, like keep your head down. And I think that's super important.
I couldn't agree more. And that's funny is I wrote the same thing down of like their identity can become those numbers. And I'm always like, when people are involved, we're always going to have to be able to let things sway just a little bit. And sometimes I tell people, as you're in growth mode or you're investing in a lot of things, I said, sometimes the numbers, it's going to take a while for those to regulate. That shouldn't hold you back. But sometimes I will see people not want to give a raise or not want to do certain things because the numbers say they can't. And I'm like, the
Mhm.
numbers are neutral. And once again, is it an investment or is it an expense? And being able to kind of use it, like I said, for more of that clarity, neutrality standpoint versus, saying to themselves, this is good or bad. Because it's not our identity. It's just information. I always joke, like, is the car bad because the fuel tank says it's on empty? Do we throw it away and we're like, bad car, this is terrible? I'm like, no, we just go, oh, it needs fuel, right? Like that's all we use it for. I'm like, that's really in my mind what these scoreboards are, is
Mhm.
it gives us information to make better decisions. And that's it. Anything there,
Yeah.
Ashley?
The only thing I think I could add to that too is it was funny when you said the Simon Sinek book, because all I kept thinking about is the other Simon Sinek book, The Start with Why. And it's helping your team to understand too, like why we're picking these numbers. Like, is doctor just pulling this number out of thin air? And this is why we need to meet this goal. It's our webinar last week that I did with Ben Kakis was all about, in Morning Huddle, they really, really focus on KPIs, and his team knows numbers and they understand why they're trying to reach certain numbers, and they understand why, a certain number of even perio diagnoses are important. And, it's a constant conversation, and he's built that into his culture so that the team knows and understands why they're doing this. I have worked for long ago some practices in the past, and it felt like that. It's like, where are we getting this number from, and why does it matter? Because if you're not communicating that to your team and getting them on board with why we're doing this and why this number is important, then it goes back to that foundational layer. So
For sure. Well, and
Mhm.
that actually segues beautifully into the next one, which
we are
was,
just
I'm like,
batting all
Yeah.
over the ball. We're like volley
I'm,
today, volleyball. That's
I'm
our I
literally
was going
like,
for.
you two come back next month. This is great. But they consistently have meetings, check-ins, audits with their teams, and they invest in the right people doing the right things. And I think they're the people who aren't, I've said it and they walk away. They're the ones who will consistently invest in meetings that matter, good check-ins that matter, having audit systems around this with their team that matter. And they love to invest big time in the right people that
Mhm.
are in the right seats. And I joke, I just said to somebody, I'll never commit to somebody more than they'll commit to us. I will never overextend more than they're going to commit to me. I will never do that. Because commitment's that two-way street. And when I have those people who are committed, I'm going to give every bit as much. Um, and the one thing I will say is, with Ben and he was talking, I'm sure his meetings have some sort of agenda to it every single time. And their meetings have a reason, they have an agenda, they have a goal. I joke, if people are all just coming early or staying for meetings that are kind of all over the place, Ash, I don't, can
I
I mean, I don't know.
despise a meeting that is, I like despise a meeting that doesn't have an agenda. And you're,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
and if
agree.
there's no goal to it, right? We've
Yeah.
all been in those meetings where you're like, why did I just spend an hour here? Nothing changed. And one of the things I say to my leadership team is the behavior changing? Is there an impact on the other side of this? Because if not, we're going to change it. If we're doing it for no other reason than we've always done this, stop. And this goes
Mhm.
all the way back to the clarity piece, because those meetings cost a lot of money for you and your team. They are truly one of the more costly things that doctors don't always talk about ROI. If your meetings are not changing behaviors or moving you closer to a certain impact goal, then reevaluate why you're having them. So they tend to have meetings, they see meetings as an investment and they expect an ROI. They don't say to themselves, I have to sacrifice production time. They say, this is an investment. This is the goal. This is the objective of the meeting on the other side. And when we're done, this is how, this is what I'm hoping that we all have on the other side of it. And then they rate their meetings. Does the team feel like we're getting closer to the objective that we started with? They don't cancel them. They don't let a crown fill those meetings in. um,
Yeah.
they they value that time and they see it as an investment piece.
Yeah. I hear so many doctors, they say, yeah, oh, I have to cancel out production time, or oh, I can't afford to have a meeting. And I think that's the kind of closed mindset of people that don't have the bigger picture in mind, because a meeting should have an ROI, like you said. Morning huddles should have an ROI in better production for the day, a better flow for the day, a better patient experience. The weekly or monthly meetings should be training on something. So here's a little tactical tidbit. If you're using meetings to transmit information and just say, this is the new policy, you should cancel your meetings. So you should record a video, send that video to your team, have them watch it either on hours or at home, whatever, and then say, hey, during this next meeting on Friday afternoon, this is what we're going to talk about. I'd like you all to bring 5 ideas. We're going to practice handoffs because this is important. We're going to come up with a system for this. Please bring some ideas about yada yada yada. So use meetings in a productive way, like you said. I think that's genius because if you're using it as a way to just transmit information, that's going to have a really bad return on your investment.
Absolutely. The book Come Up for Air is incredible with that, of like really saying to yourself, if you're transmit exactly what they said too, where like we learned a long time ago, if you're really just using it as like a transmit of information, truly either write it up on whiteboards and have your team check it every morning huddle, record a video and we post it on Slack. And then also we only post stuff that's relevant to the people who are going to use it. So like if it's something that is only for hygienists and DAs, transmit it only to them. That's
Yeah.
another thing, is sometimes we use meetings to spray shot everybody and it applies to 2 or 3 people. And we just wasted a ton of people's time having to listen to the insurance person go through AR claims or whatever maybe.
Yeah.
And that book was a really incredible one of just helping us to organize when do meetings matter, when to actually have in-person meetings versus even when do you do an email or a Zoom or a Slack or something like that.
Yeah. And I'll say it's hard to block off time, but do it proactively. So start right now, do it 6 months out, do it 3 months out, whenever you can, start putting a cadence of meetings. You can always fill those hours in later. I mean, if you said, well, we don't really have anything to talk about and I put in too many meetings, that's a good problem to have. But it's also an opportunity. One of the things we're going to do, none of my team is listening, so it's okay for me to share this. We're going to surprise them with we're going to have a boring meeting agenda set up to spoof them. And then we're going to say, hey, we're all going to the arcade bar and we're going to play video games for 2 hours together and roll skee ball. Because, some people, they want more camaraderie time. And that might actually be as good of an outcome or return on my investment as having a meeting and discussing something. So just proactively block out that time. And if you don't use it, that's okay. You can refill it in with a crown prep or an emergency root canal, whatever. But just do that in the future.
Yeah, I do think there's a level of preparation that has to go into it. And I say, like, if we're going to take our team's time, having exactly that, having those meetings set out, having the agenda created, we preheat our team too for this is what's coming up. Like, just here's the agenda, here's what to come prepared for, and here's your part of it. And I do think people can end up having way more effective meetings. And to Ashlee's point, like, knowing what you need to come in prepared for and knowing what to expect and maintaining that timeline. I would have to guess, like as a team member, if we say it's going to be from 4 to 5 and then all of a sudden it's from 4 to 7:30 because we just keep going on and on, that's hard. So that's where I'm like, I think there's a level of preparation that has to go into all of this to ensure that they're going to be successful. Ashlee, I don't know your thoughts, but
I feel like you do know my thoughts because you just said them to volley back and forth, right? No, I mean, from the team member's point of view, I feel like as a team member, it's very frustrating to show up when there isn't a plan and an agenda. And, then I feel like, what are you doing? You tell me I have to meet these numbers, but now we're taking this time to do this thing that you're
yes.
not prepared for. Like that's going to cause me more, anxiety and stress. So you touched on it earlier with the leading from the top and being the model. And that is a piece of it, it's the being prepared and having the agenda. And like you said, Addison, that's the effective, not right. If you don't need that time, then it's, hey, guys, by the way, we only need an hour today. Let's squeeze in, the next emergency that we get in and get some more production in or whatever it is. That's so much easier to do. And setting that cadence instead of going backwards. So, but that being prepared and having a plan goes a really long way as far as setting the model for your team.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, and then on that note, they invest in meetings and they invest in the right people. And that's kind of part B of this, is that they really do spend the time investing in the right people, and they see it as such. They spend the time either with them or taking them with them to, CE. I mean, I think we can all attest, like, some of the most successful practices they bring that integrator or that OM, or they bring those key people and they pour into them and they let them really absorb it. And everybody knows Debbie and I sat out in hallways and worked on stuff every single meeting, every single time, when we went to those meetings. They don't, I see leaders, of really successful organizations, they take their time before they give a title to those right people. They're not like, you're an incredible hygienist. Would you like to be clinical director now? They don't give the titles before they even have clarity around what are their expectations of this title. Is this actually the right person? They tend to go a little bit slower. And one of the tips I always say is have them be a project manager of something, have them manage a project, and perhaps that is overseeing one or two people with the project versus giving them a title that is really hard. Like I said, that's one of those sometimes fear-based decisions that I know I made, is I gave the title before it was earned because I was scared, and it's hard to come back from that. It's hard to move somebody away from that.
Well, yeah, I think you and I have both coached people through that situation where they ascended somebody into a manager position too quickly, or gave somebody a title too quickly. And then they're like stuck in a limbo of, well, this person really isn't a good fit for the job, but I didn't have clarity around what I expected, and they didn't have clarity about what it meant. And now we're both kind of mad. And what do I do? And I'm like, well, you've gotten yourself in a pickle. Hands off. See you later. Uh, Not how we coach in DSI, but but the better way to do that is to slowly invest and just say, hey, I'd like you to do this leadership course with me. Um, I'd like you to read this book and just tell me what you think. And, just like dating before marriage, it takes time to kind of get to know the person. So you can't just jump into something and say, well, like, yeah, all of a sudden you're the office manager, or you've been here the longest as the front desk person, and I need an office manager. We can get by for a while without having a titled leader. And so if you're in a small office of like 7 or less people, you don't even necessarily need to have an office manager. You need to have somebody who just knows how to do each of their jobs, and you can be their leader. Once you're above 7, 7 to 25, or well, 7 to 20, then you need to have an office manager. And maybe over 20, you need to probably think about leads for each department so that each person isn't managing over 7 to 10 people. But yeah, like make sure you're slowly integrating these leaderships, and having them understand that you don't get to be like, this leadership position is not like a kingship. It isn't you get perks. It's actually means you get more monkeys on your back. It's, that, as they say, excrement rolls uphill. So just know that as a leader, you're going to be a servant leader, which means you're going to be collecting all the problems of everybody, and then you're going to bring that to me, and we're going to discuss what its potential solutions are. So just know that it's not really as much of a lift you up thing. It's as a, well, this is going to be a lot more work for you, but it's rewarding. And so
Yeah.
as when you get somebody that understands that flip, that's when it's a great time to invest in that person.
Yeah.
Well, and
They're
you're sorry to interrupt, but
no.
you're setting the model for that, right? Again, that goes back to, as the leader, you've exemplified that same value, and that's why, hopefully they have seen that and get that
Mhm.
as well. Real quick, we had a question about meetings that I missed. The question was from Dr. Chang: is everyone on the clock for meetings at the same hourly rate, and what do you do about associate doctors?
Mhm. I go ahead, Dawson. I was like, I can see what I do.
Associate doctors, I mean, don't get paid for meetings because they get paid for production. But everyone else is on the clock for meetings, unless it's a fun activity. Fun activities sometimes are on the clock if that was going to be a planned on the clock meeting. But then sometimes, if it's just uh, partying, okay, then that's not on the clock.
Well, and one thing I will say is most states have regulations around this, meaning some of them are if you buy them lunch, you can have them clock out. Some are if it's mandatory, you have to let them stay clocked in. But one thing I will say is like we used to use Cedar and they were really helpful in what are our state laws around meetings. Because I do think you do have to uphold that because once in a while you'll have that team member that will say, you're supposed to pay me for blank. So knowing your state laws, I think, is really important, but we do it exactly the same. Associates are not paid. They get to reap the benefits of those meetings by, once again, having the potential to further, their own production and financial gain. All team members, if it's a mandatory meeting, we allow them to stay clocked in, obviously. So,
Thanks, guys.
but yeah, I mean, I think on that note, I think as Addison was saying too, the people, they don't give the titles before the people are committed to the process. And they have to show a willingness, a desire, and an initiative to want so much to positively influence other people. They honestly, I had one person who, it's funny because she didn't feel like she was ready, but she was like, but I can't have anybody else do it because I care this, like, I need to be able to learn to do this because, like, I know the impact I can have on these people and I want that. And those are the ones that are fun to invest in. The ones that see it as a title, or like you said, they get to lord things over people. Those just never work out well. And I joke, I think that organizational chart, I joke, I'm like, really, guys, it almost should be flipped this way. Because I said, we really are just gravity. We're kind of holding up to some extent that we're the gravity that holds everything in place. And when we're not doing what we need to, we can tell when things start kind of falling apart. And I say all the time, like, leaders are the ones that, and especially as they raise groups of leaders around them, their desire, like of course, everybody wants to be liked, but they don't fear being disliked short term. What they rather care about is the kindness that comes with complete clarity. They care so much about being completely clear and transparent more than tiptoeing and being liked. They are just full of that neutral, clear, compassionate, but firm communication. I say, like, people know where they stand. And I think there's something with those kind of leaders that they have a benevolence to them, but you know exactly what they stand for, that I think team members can respect that. And they may not always like it, but they respect knowing exactly where the boundaries of things are. So that was kind of my final point on that one. Anybody else have anything?
I think well said. I mean, it's
Agreed.
just, yeah, picking the people who don't want it for the title, they just want it because they want to help their team members.
Yeah, for sure. And they're going to be disliked sometimes too, and I warn them of that. But the clarity that or the kindness that comes from being completely clear is what people need the most, actually. So really, to wrap it up, I was like, man, I could probably keep going as to things I see that are, repetitive with the most successful practices. But, I think what's pretty great is I think we can all agree it's clarity of who they are, why they exist, what really matters, and they reinvest in thinking about that to make sure that they're still wanting to climb the ladder against the wall that they have that ladder against. It's led by people who care, and they care a lot. They put their egos aside and they want to be self-aware. They know the numbers that matter. They don't major in the minors, and they see people as investments. And they meet consistently with their teams and other leaders, and they invest their time into the right people, the people who are committed to them. Anything else, though, to kind of put a fine point on it, you guys?
I think I will say the one thing that is a total shameless plug for DSN. And so anyone who's already on here already knows this, but they don't learn from their own mistakes. They learn from the mistakes of others. So these leaders who lead these practices, I mean, I get texts all the time from many of you, and it's because people want to learn not from me, but from other people as well. And they share their problems on DSN. They are willing and open and honest about what they're facing, what should I do, and they get the best information from multiple sources. So they're not niched into just, I'm going to follow this dogma of what I was taught in dental school. They're open-minded to sharing their problems in an honest fashion, getting feedback, and helping other people who were a few steps behind them to become better. And so I think that's the other thing is, you try to not step in as many potholes because you learn from the people that were ahead of you.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Ashlee, anything to conclude?
No, I just absolutely, Addison, I have to thank you for coming on. I love obviously doing webinars with you, Summer, but always good to mix it up. And you're just such a wealth of knowledge as far as all of the potholes, right, that you have learned from and edited and corrected from. And anyway, it is an absolute pleasure to have you. So thank you for joining us today.
Yes. Thank you, Addison, for joining us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you for hosting or co-hosting with me, Ashlee.
Always.
All right, guys,
All right.
everybody have a great day. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
See you later.